Hello and welcome back to this exciting coverage of the 2024 Järva Open X Tyyni, a fantastic tournament set here in the heart of Stockholm, Sweden. A very exciting weekend. This is Round 2 Front 9 MPO lead card coverage brought to you by MDG Media. I'm Connor Wood, and with me, Elias Luukkonen.
What's up, Connor? What's up, viewers? Nice to be here once again. Yeah, second round on the legendary Järva course. Of course, quite different than what it used to be back in the years past when we had the Masters tournament here. But still some great history on the course. And interesting scores in round 1. Nobody really lighting it up on the course actually. 8 under being the hot round.
And we see the man who set that here, Eeku Kölhi, just setting the pace on the European Pro Tour here for this tournament at 8 under. Just one stroke behind him. Who do we have here, Elias?
Davidsson, one of the players that I did definitely expect playing very well going into this tournament. He's a great driver, a lot of holes that really suits his game here.
And we see here LEnni Kemppainen. Elias, I'm not so familiar with his game. What do we know?
Lefty player, very accurate, has a steep hyzer putt, but a great putter, especially up from C2. And of course Joona Heinänen, one of the better throwers of the disc. He has all the sort of angles, especially on the backhand drive. Very smooth, very controlled. Starting on hole number 1, what's the play here?
We have a 121 meter par 3 with OB lining the left side and a right to left sloping fairway. You will find the basket tucked behind this well guarded green. You have this late window you want to enter. You mentioned in the first round, Elias, one of the best holes in Europe for the backhand roller. Otherwise, a lot of players will be throwing a long turnover backhand or potentially the forehand if you have the power. Something that's finishing strongly to the right really mitigates all the risk of OB left, the one danger you want to avoid.
Kölhi. Eeku being a player that is comfortable with all sorts of different shots. He has phenomenal technical game. Just the consistency that's usually holding him down. A bit too much cut on this roller off the tee, and that is a pretty large mistake, although he might have just curled barely back in bounds. Went fully over the gravel field. I'm surprised he went that wide off the roller.
His name is Davidsson.
Yeah, I think for a lot of cards there was a left to right wind here on hole 1, which for the backhand roller definitely impacts the angle you want to land on. Something a little bit more cut, trusting that the wind will move it to the right as it catches the flight plate. We see Daniel with a nice adjustment to the roller and even curls a bit too far right. He'll be having a downhill putt, but really nice distance control.
The third one, also from Finland. LEnni Kemppainen.
For LEnni, it's playing a little bit different with a lefty backhand. This hole is a great shape for just throwing your stable driver. I was about to say pretty low, but he's actually going very high here. Of course, there's room at the end if you can just get barely below the branches, which he was not quite able to do.
Good one, thank you.
Bit inside there.
The last for today, also from Finland, Joona, Heinänen.
And we see here Joona Heinänen has had fantastic experience this season, already competing overseas, and has really stepped up his game in the last season or two.
Yeah, one of the older players in the field, especially from the top players. And look at that shot. This is what makes him so consistent on the course. Just incredible angle control on the backhand, and he has a lot of distance, yet he also is very smooth off the tee. Something that I really personally respect as a player. Somebody is not always willing to show off that distance, rather just play it smart.
As we see from Eeku, looked to have just curled inbounds. He also has a long bit and just a touch low off the cage. Although it does settle, this can be a dangerous green for rollaways if you land your putt on edge or bounce off the cage. Daniel with a really healthy putt, very confident, looking straight down, and well got birdie there.
Yeah, hole 1 is definitely birdie that you would like to get if you're comfortable with that roller shot. With the air shot here though, Joona, that's a great birdie. He made it look quite easy, but the angle control is very tricky. You can easily cut roll into the left OB or fade out if you're a bit too high.
Yeah, you really want something late flipping for that backhand, or you play with a lot of width and hold an Anheuser turn the entire way, both of which require good precision with this late gap about 110 meters down the fairway.
And moving on to an easier hole here, hole number 2, 96 meters, potentially playing even a little bit shorter because there's usually a slight right-left tailwind on this hole, and also very fast ground play just near the basket. You want to throw something straight, you can choose a putter or a mid-range, and try to land about 10 meters short with as flat of an angle as possible. Just try to slide your way there and hopefully avoid the long right side because there's a huge drop-off, making the putts a bit more difficult.
Daniel here with quite a late release, and he's fortunate to settle pretty softly there. There's a lot of room with that slope downwards to roll away, but he will be in a manageable par save position, although very obstructed. We get a look at Joona's angle control here, but unfortunately inversely gets an early release here. And you mentioned, Elias, statistically one of the more scoreable holes here on 2. Could you break it down for us?
Yeah, hole 2 playing significantly under par with a 2.88 average, so definitely a hole you would like to birdie here. And LEnni gonna be a bit far. I'd say a trickier hole for the lefty as the backhand is gonna be fading towards that downhill slope. Forehand, usually players don't have perfect angle control with a flat shot. And Eeku there, not really in position for the birdie either. If you're, I'd say, outside of 15 meters on this hole, it's not even worth it to think about running the putt.
Joona here gonna need some good touch to end short and left of the basket, because as you see, anything long or right is just so dangerous. And some frustration shown from him there. Naturally so. I think all of these players know what the mistake to make is here on hole 2. It's a well-known green, and Daniel close to the edge, but with a good adjustment there and keeping himself left of the basket ultimately, or fading left.
Quite surprising to not see anybody from the lead card inside the circle on this hole. As LEnni, he's way long. This is more towards the next hole's tee pad. You can see it in the background there. Pretty brave effort. Feel like his putting has been what has earned him his best finishes this season. He had a couple of top 3 finishes on the Finnish Pro Tour, which obviously holds a very high standard as far as the level of play.
And Joona here facing the death putt for the bogey save, and does put that one in. So he goes back to even through the first 2 holes, and a confident looking putting stroke there from Eeku as well.
Also a player that can putt incredibly hot, and showcasing that in round 1 from circle 2, Eeku made 6 out of 8 putts. So just an incredible performance. He wasn't driving the disc that incredibly well, but just that putting really saving his score.
And I believe also having 100% C1X alongside that C2. Really impressive on the green. Here we are on hole number 3. 103 meter shot that most players will play as a left to right shaping angle. You have OB lining long right and late on the left. A lot of players are going to play a forehand hyzer. For LEnni will be just a backhand hyzer. Alternatively, you can play a turnover with a mid-range or so, but a lot of players are going to try to end just short because you see OB comes very close in on the green. So about circle's edge short is the most common landing zone players will try to consistently get to.
This hole is very easy for the top level players, 40% birdie here. And if you have this forehand that Daniel is showing off, it's just a simple shot and almost acing the basket. Able to stop before the long OB as well. Great control, great touch.
LEnni here has this very wide, is going to need to find late stability as he flies over out of bounds. And off the stake, he is in there just outside bullseye. Short birdie putt. Fortune favors the brave here in Järva.
And Eeku backhand, more of a technical shot compared to the forehand, where with forehand you can just hit it flat and trust that overstable finish. He's going to be outside the circle. Not what you want on this hole, but a fine result for a release that he looked to be very unhappy with. And this is the other line on this hole. If it's not too windy, player with a lot of arm speed can go for this wide hyzer. And Joona there, just outside the bullseye. Very far playing hyzer for being only 103 meters. You have to cut it quite vertically up off the tee because of the first bush.
Definitely the early height making that slightly pinched option, but it plays nicely. We see a beautiful C2 putt there for the birdie here on hole 3 for Eeku Kölhi as he tries to maintain that lead, sitting at 8 under. But Daniel, with a good start, will be looking to move himself to 9 under. We go to LEnni first.
Good job. It's looking like a very likely star frame for the lead card on the easiest hole on the course. 2.8 average on the field, and keep in mind the field is slightly weaker than we are used to in the last few weeks of tournaments in Europe, so definitely a pretty easy hole. And as you can see, Morten Brenna absolutely lighting up the course with the current course record 11 under. Incredible round.
Disc sport and Innova share the same values and understanding how the sport should grow.
Rene has always been a great partner of Innova. His vision of disc golf in Estonia and the Baltic region is exactly what we're looking for.
Our goal would be to grow the sport, grow the brand, so that eventually, in the long run, Innova will be #1 in Europe again.
This is potentially one of the trickiest holes on the course. Hole number 4, only 100 meters, but the distance that you have to cover with the curve might be a little bit longer. Ideal shot here is gonna be a left to right moving shot once again. Plays really good for a right hand forehand that is skipping through the gap and to the right, ideally with a distance driver. You can also go for a quick flipping roller, but yeah, really the main play here is just try to either hit that gap or play a little bit too far right, seemingly missing the fairway to the right and getting through some trees.
And I think seeing a player such as Daniel here going to the backhand when he's so competent with the forehand power and angle control speaks volumes about the sort of shape this hole has. It's very late moving right shape, and although the forehand is possible, the roller definitely plays as well. LEnni shaping the hyzer here just battles the ceiling but lands into that sweet spot. Will be putting uphill about just within the circle.
Eeku here roller as well. Daniel's roller was perfect. That's exactly how you draw it up on this hole. And Eeku as well. Look at these drives. 2 drives in circle 1 is incredible. I'd say this might be the trickiest hole on the course to get inside of circle 1 for the birdie.
And look at the flare skip for Joona there, a player who we know to be predominantly backhand. He is actually the one throwing the forehand here, so a little bit of a shift of roles. Some great hole design to encourage players to sort of expand their preferred skill set and play some unique shots.
Just a high release there from LEnni. He's the only one that was outside the circle. Joona just barely in, and a great hit. Middle of the basket. Putting is something that I'd say used to be his weakness, and I'd still say that driving is definitely his strength, but his putting has improved a lot in the past couple of years.
You can see he's putting in the work throughout the season. Daniel a little bit low. Eeku more upwards on the hill, didn't curl fully back down, giving him a level putt, and he takes advantage of that there. Really fantastic display of 2 solid rollers there.
And I just still want to go back to how difficult this hole is playing, and imagine the fact that there were only 11 players in the field inside of circle 1 putting for birdie, and we had 3 out of those 11 on this card alone.
There's a reason that they're on lead card here today, Elias, and continuing to set the pace for the field. Currently 9 down, the lead for this lead card. We move on to hole number 5, a 71-meter par 3 island hole, playing as hazard if you don't stick it. You see this soft mound throughout the inbounds area. A lot of discs that come in too steeply on the spike hyzer angle will roll, as well as putts that catch an edge. It's a very dangerous green, and as a result, some players will prefer to throw a very direct shot into the front of the hill to try and slow their disc down. Otherwise, the backhand hyzer is quite open, and a little bit long right of the basket is really the most generously sized, safe area to land. So it really is about risk management and trying to control the speed.
And I like the release out of the hand for Eeku, but just not having an overstable disc enough to finish all the way to the basket. He's gonna be definitely within putting distance, I believe just inside of 10 meters. But it's not really the hole you wanna have a 10-meter putt on. You would really love to be parked here, or at least inside that 8-7 meter range. And same thing for Joona. Scary putt, especially with the hillside, a lot of chance for roll away there.
Daniel going much higher and with a much more overstable disc. We see it dropping almost vertically and just slowed down by the impact. He settles at the top, going to have a softly downward sloping putt, but inside the circle. LEnni here looking to create much more of a direct straight line to the green. It's important that he hits the front of the hill like that to control the speed, and really nice shape. Well done.
LEnni is very accurate with those short forehands with the overstable approach disc. And Eeku here, aggressive run. Looks like he was outside the circle here. Quite courageous to go for the putt from that distance, as Joona also just barely missing. Looks like we have a lot of wind at this moment. The wind was definitely gusty, not very consistent throughout the day.
Certainly more volatile weather than in round 1. There was some rain, some heavier winds, but you mentioned it gusty. They were very on and off, so really encouraging players to gauge the wind at the moment of their putt or throw. What you took 1 minute ago couldn't really be the situation when you're the one throwing, so important to keep players on their feet, stay sharp, and you see good control there by LEnni to secure the birdie here on 5.
And that gusty wind potentially making the putting even more difficult than it usually would be. For example, on this hole, there was only a single circle 2 putt made throughout the entire round of over 100 players in the field. Very interesting statistic here. And hole number 6, we're going downhill, far hole, 148 meters, but playing much shorter. Probably you have to throw a shot worth about 115 meters to get all the way there. The ideal shot is gonna be flying through the gap, the same gap as the drone is flying through. But a lot of players, if they're gonna miss on this hole, they're gonna miss right with a stable disc and hopefully glide through some of those late trees. It's really all about controlling the distance. You don't want to hit it too high because you can easily fly over the basket.
A very attackable hole, but not without its dangers. Daniel has this turning over, playing to that right side and looking to catch an edge here and move left. He actually goes over the fence. Obi long off that skip. Just such a piercing shot that was pure, it really didn't touch a thing, and he's going to have a very awkward position as we go now to LEnni, shaping the forehand, soft flex, and just didn't quite catch the ceiling. You need to be low enough really to get a clean entrance into the green, and he just catches those high branches. We see Eeku, a nice nose angle from him here to try and hit that low gap.
This one just needs to sneak through a couple of trees. Does it pretty well. He's gonna be on that right side circle 2, but as we saw in round 1, definitely a range that he's comfortable from. And as I said, he's a player that can be on and off. One day he can be 1050 rated, next day he can be 970 rated. You never really know with him.
Joona coming in very fast as well, however is caught by the fence. And we'll see what looks they're left with. It can be pretty treacherous down there. We go now to Daniel. Behind the fence he's putting now. I know actually that Daniel plays a provisional here. It was unclear where the OB line was, not quite extending that far past the green on the T sign. He played the provisional from both behind and in front of the fence there.
Of course, the ideal situation with the provisional throw being that both ways to play the hole would create the same score, where the players wouldn't have to check it after the round. As Eeku, that's a terrible roll. Luckily settling in the circle, but that could have been horrendous.
As we go now to LEnni, he had the lateral look across the hill and just catching the cage there. Eeku now with a chance.
Solid par. This hole is actually playing surprisingly easy. Not really because there are a lot of birdies. There are still a surprising amount of 28% birdies on this hole, but just the lack of bogeys. Daniel there is gonna be one of only 9 players getting a bogey or worse on this hole.
Good to make that putt there, the longer of his two, playing both provisional outcomes. Joona as well securing the par. Really rare that you see anyone go over that fence. Daniel is possibly the only one this whole weekend to do so. Here we are on hole number 7, a 108-meter uphill par 3 OB lining the left and right side. Players are going to be playing a soft flex or light turnover as they try to hit this late gap. This green offers a little bit of a backstop with the slope, so you can really try to drive one into the hill near that FPO basket, or just crash the trees on the right side with a leftwards fading disc. A lot of players will just try to dig the hill and scramble a putt in this densely wooded green.
Yeah, this hole has a bit of a luck factor to it. A lot of the players just trying to crash through those trees, and this is exactly what LEnni is doing, especially with a lefty. There isn't a great line to get clean to the basket. He's just taking his chances, landing in the hillside there. Unfortunately not getting through all the way, but he's still gonna have a putt from outside the edge of C1.
Eeku playing a much more direct line into the hill and gonna be having an open putt about circle's edge. That's, I think, a very common landing zone for players who aren't trying to bite off too much. Joona here plays with a little bit more height, but we do not see the degree of turn that I think he wanted. However, still a pretty fortunate result, just settling on that hillside. Will be left with a few trees in his way.
And Daniel here. The more uncommon play, there are a couple of late trees that are very badly in the way for this hyzer shot, and hitting some of them actually getting a slightly unfortunate break, bouncing off the tree to the right side OB. Right side OB is a good couple or a few meters away from the tree, so he must have kicked pretty far to the right.
LEnni, a very obstructed look, tries to find his window, but unable to get through cleanly. Joona now, with just not, if not slightly more obstructed, and an incredible commitment with a pretty nasty spit out. You saw just how hard he had to putt that from the straddle stance with even a step for power. Bit of a heartbreaker there for Joona. Daniel as well, with not much of a look. You can see these guys are not far from the basket, but with no real line for a nice clean putting stroke. Eeku, however, with the widest gap.
Also just not quite hitting it in the center. And funnily enough, Joona being the only person who hit it in the center actually twice on this hole. Only one of them staying in. But yeah, this is a very difficult green. Statistic that really showcases the difficulty of this green is that only 54% of the C1X putts on this hole were made. Usually the percentage on an average hole is closer to 75 or even 80.
Also a pretty significant uphill slope if you are where Eeku was. It's very slanted, and Needs a lot more touch and angle control on that height going uphill. We see, however, here quite a flat hole in altitude, but a severe left to right slope. Hole number 8 is a 96-meter par 3. Players will be looking to play a hyzer flip or soft flex, ideally ending to the left side into the hill and trying to avoid a roll, as to the right is a long downward slope. The organizers have set up a wall to catch the majority of rollers, but even good discs that land in a good spot can find a lot of trouble. So there is also a little bit of a luck factor here in terms of sticking the green, but with disc and angle control, especially decision making, there are things you can do to try and mitigate the ground play. LEnni here going very overstable.
And this is overturned. This is far to the right. Luckily did have some good fade back at the end, so he should be fine at least for a par, maybe even a look for birdie. But yeah, this hole, really the only way to remove the chance of a rollaway as well as possible is to land your disc flat. And while that is a great strategy for the landing, it's not a great strategy for the flight, as Eeku, that's one of the more fortunate rolls we have seen on this hole.
Certainly, it's honestly very rare that you see friendly ground play on this hole. I think every player off the tee slightly blind to the green. They throw their disc and just hope that they don't see it move left to right, because as they accelerate, just as Joona's did, they just tend to keep going. Daniel also playing quite an aggressive flex shape, going to need a lot of late stability, and catching those branches slowing him down a bit. He will have a low ceiling but straight look into the green.
Daniel really not being a player who's known for having a touchy backhand. It's something that he has been trying to improve on in the off-season successfully, but still not the strong suit of his game. Strong effort there, luckily no roll away. And let's see, Joona, this putt is gonna play incredibly far. You can see he's 20 meters away, but probably the putt playing closer to 30.
Eeku taking advantage of the friendly roll towards the basket, able to secure the 2. Elias, talk to us about the par and bogey percentage here. I think it's one of the shorter par 3s, certainly birdieable, but I guess also a lot of danger.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that there was only 7 players in the field taking a bogey or worse. That's way less than you would expect with all of the rollaway potential. Mostly pars here, 64%. I think it's just a difficult hole to park because you see those rollaways, but usually if you roll away you can get up and down for the par. And as we're moving on to the final hole of the front 9, hole number 9, par 478 meters. Off the tee it's a hyzer shot. You can either go in front of this birch tree, which is the play for most players, or if you have a big arm and you're confident with that huge hyzer with a distance driver, you can go around the big birch tree, trying to get closer to the mandos, but you really don't want to be too close to those. It's a double mando, very tight gap, which you have to move through and to the right to a very dangerous green. I think Eeku chose the bigger hyzer here out of the 2.
And I like the use of height there to try and control the ground play. Sometimes the lower hyzers can catch a very fast skip or 2. And with left side OB coming into play pretty quickly, even from the sweet spot of where you're trying to land for an ideal upshot, the height will control how much they skip. We see LEnni catching that big guardian tree you touched on, Elias, falling just below it. Joona as well playing a wide and high hyzer.
Great looking line here, just needs to finish left enough, and that is too far left with the skip. He has missed the mando line, although from there, from the drop zone, it's really not that tricky of an up and down. You're pretty close to the gap already. And Daniel, this is looking a little bit too far. Did he actually make the mando? No, he looks like he did miss it to the right. And yeah, pretty surprising error from both Joona and Daniel. You can really remove the chance of missing the mando by going a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I think the wind certainly coming into play there for both of them. An interesting play for LEnni here. Kind of ambiguous as to how close or far he is from making the double mando, but looked to have spiked cleanly through the gap he needed to. As we go now to Eeku, a soft flex will control that rightward skip at the end. And he did exactly what you want to do, land it just short of the basket, because anything that slips over that cresting hill often ends at the bottom. Just another example of these treacherous Järva greens. Joona as well, getting that slight anhyzer out of the hand to late stable finish. Really nice touch.
Yeah, very treacherous greens. We see this pretty much exclusively on the front nine. There is maybe one very difficult green on the back, but this is mostly a feature of the front nine. And you can see it right there. Daniel, just a bit too much speed flying over the hillside. And LEnni, I think a smart layup from there.
Yeah, shows a lot of maturity, particularly when it's a difference between birdie and par. Daniel, another one of these putts that's maybe 18-20 meters, but playing closer to 30 with how steep that slope is. Death putt for Eeku here, but stone cold. Very smooth on the putting stroke.
It's a good birdie on the second most difficult hole on the course, averaging 4.29 and 21% of the field getting the birdie here. As we're finishing the front nine, nobody lighting it up on fire, but really nobody either melting down too bad.
Yeah, these guys going into this round at the end of the day know the scores that have been set, so aware of what they need to shoot, and not quite catching the pace they'll want on the front nine, but certainly well within contention. The field really picked it up today though, Elias. There's more contenders who are really pushing those podium positions.
Yeah, we saw the hot round from Mort and Brenda on many of those 6-7 unders. Thank you guys for watching the front nine. We're gonna see some more open holes, longer bombs on the back nine. Hope to catch you guys there.